to all of you in the London Teen Ministry. Such an honour to be asked by Christian to deliver this little devotional video here on Can I Trust the Bible? I think it's just brilliant that you're being encouraged to ask questions. I still have a 6-year-old who asked me many questions that I can't answer. So it's good that you're being encouraged to actually ask questions. And this is a great question to ask. You know, can I trust the Bible? It's a fantastic question to be asked because I've seen, and you may have seen yourself even, that sometimes people lose their faith over not dealing with the questions that are in our heads. The things that you hear from people in your families, at school, you hear people saying, you know, can you really trust the Bible? And they may have reasons for thinking they can't trust it. But what I want to say to you is, just to start with, is that we really must ask questions. It's such a great thing to be able to do. The Bible even holds us up people and calls them as being of noble character. This is in Acts 17, the Bereans. You may have heard of the Bereans. And it's comparing them to the Jews in Thessalonica. And it says in Acts 17, verse 11, it says that the Berean Jews were of more noble character than those of Thessalonica, for they received the message with great eagerness and examined the scriptures every day to see if what Paul said was true. So what they were doing was looking at what Paul said and saying, is it true? And God is saying they were more noble. I'm holding them up because they asked the question, is it true? So it's a good thing. God wants us to do this. He wants us to ask, is this true? Is His word true? Is it reliable? And then dig in to find out. And hopefully you'll enjoy that digging phase. And I ask this today, are we still inquisitive? It's good to be inquisitive and it's good to ask questions, provided that you actually go after the answers. But the Bible does make incredible claims about itself and about Jesus and about our lives. So therefore, it's important that we examine what the Bible actually says. Just a few incredible facts. You may have heard these already. It was written over a 1500-year period. This a long period. It's over 50 authors from many different walks of life. Thousands of prophecies, hundreds of which have already been fulfilled. It is an historical book set in the right historical background to the geography and those rulers and that were in power at the time. So it's set in the backdrop of history. Very historical book in that sense. And it is the greatest selling book of all time. Over 5 billion copies have been sold to date that we know of. And there are many copies even beyond that. So 5 billion copies, incredible. The question is though, and this is the important bit, can we trust it? Okay, these are incredible facts, but can we actually trust it? Can we tell if it's reliable or not? And if, how do we know? So, how do we know is the Bible reliable? That's the question today. But the question from that is then, how do we know if anything is reliable? How can we test if any book is reliable? You study in school, go on to college and university maybe, books on science, geography, history. How do you know what I'm reading is reliable or not? Especially if it goes further back in time, as the Bible does, maybe thousands of years ago. Now, the first thing I'd say to that is obviously we need to read the books themselves. We can't have a strong opinion about them books being reliable or not and never have read them. Watch out for that, especially with the Bible. But here's the thing. There is actually a test. And this is what this is about today. There is actually a test. There is a way for us to be able to know if the Bible is reliable or not. There are tests applied that we can apply to the Bible. Now, why is that so important? Well, for something to be proved reliable or trustworthy or good or something you would like to follow, it needs to be proved if it's reliable or not. It needs to pass the test. Whenever I was young, I loved playing football. I am a Liverpool supporter. A few cheers there, a few boos as well. But I loved playing football. I thought I was a good footballer. So I tried out for the school football team and I thought this is my opportunity to show that I am good at a few good bad games in school. Here's my chance to prove it. First year I went off, did the test for the football team. I thought I'd done brilliant, scored a great goal, was waiting on the positive, yes, you're in the team. Didn't happen. For some reason I didn't get picked. So the next year I went along, still feeling as a good footballer, but didn't happen last year. Didn't score any goals. Had a really bad incident at the end where I tried to score a goal and kicked the goalkeeper's hands and he had to go off injured. Thought I have no chance of getting picked this year, but that year I got picked for the school football team. We didn't end up having very many games, but the point was my ability to play football was shown by this test, this run out, this trial. I passed the test. It's so important that we've got a test, something that can assess whether something's trustworthy or not, whether it's good or not, whether it's reliable or not. There is a test. History books have 3 special tests applied to them in order to know whether they're reliable and trustworthy. And they're known as the 3 basic principles of historiography. There's a big word for us. Historiography. 3 tests. You don't remember these names necessarily, but they're pretty simple. Bibliographical tests, it's all about the documents. Internal evidence, external evidence. The bibliographical tests, some mouthfuls these, is all about the transmission of the documents. Can you trust them? Internal evidence, can you trust the writers and what they said? External evidence, is there other sources around that time which verify what has been said? So we'll dig into these. Just before we do, I want to say, and this is not my own bias, I've investigated this, just as Luke said in the chart of his gospel, the Bible passes the test in first place. We'll see why now. The Bible passes the test in first place. We're going to see why just now. Now, what I want to do to help us remember this in the future is, and I'm well known for this, is an acronym. I want to give us an acronym for remembering this information I'm about to give you to show you why the Bible passes the test in first place. An acronym. This is the key word I want you to remember in this devotional is time. Time. The thing that we feel I never have enough of, the thing that's always moving very fast, the thing that God has put in place. Man has come up with a construct of time, but God has given us seasons and time. Time is the way I want us to remember this. This time acronym looks at them 3 tests I just mentioned. The information within this acronym is all based on them 3 tests to show us why the Bible passes these tests as a historical book in first place. First one, T. So you've got time. T stands for the time gap. The time gap between the events in the Bible that it describes, which is Jesus' ministry starting in AD 27, the death of Paul in AD 62 at the end of Acts. That period of time that events took place and the writing down of these events is so uniquely small. In fact, it's smaller than any other historical events that we know of. It's so small that there could not have been any time for lies to develop. So it talked about AD 27 to 62. This is the events that is covered in the New Testament. Galatians was written down around AD 50. It was well verified with Paul as an historical character that Galatians, he wrote the letter of Galatians in AD 50. And Mark was written down, the first of the Gospels, in AD 64. So we know that the events, the books was writing down only within the lifetime of that period that we just described. So the books have been written down at the time when the events were taking place, and of it up to 20 to 30 years after in some cases. So there was such a small gap of time between the event and the writing down that there wasn't time for lies to come in. Why? The eyewitnesses to the events were still alive. So the eyewitnesses were still alive. And I'm going to give us a little saying at the end of all this just to help pull that together. But it's such a uniquely small time gap. There was not enough time for people to make up stories about what happened when they wrote them down. The people who were alive whenever the event took place was able to see what was written down, and they knew. Again, Acts was written in AD 62, around AD 62 to 64. So when that Acts was written down and it was published and people were able to read these documents, they could tell, well, I was alive when this happened. We don't read any documents of people who said that wasn't true or it happened a different way. So that's T, stands for time gap, a uniquely small gap of time that couldn't have allowed for lies to come in. The second one, so T, time, I stands for the internal evidence. And that this was all about, can we trust those who wrote down what we read in the Bibles today? Those who wrote it down, like I said already, was written down during the lifetime of the eyewitnesses. Paul wrote, again, Luke wrote Acts in around AD 62 to 64. So that was out for public reading, if you like, at the same time that the eyewitnesses were still alive to them events, and also people who were eyewitnesses of Jesus. But like I said already, there are no documents out there that exists with an alternative description of the events themselves. In Acts 2:22, and in many places it says, Paul is talking and he says, as you yourselves know. So he says when he talks to the people, you know about Jesus, you know what he did, you were an eyewitness. So they were talking during the lifetime, excuse me, of eyewitnesses. The other thing you'll probably know about the scriptures, the other thing you'll realize is that it describes many embarrassing details. If you were writing a little story about your life, and let's just say you're making up something, would you want to include the embarrassing details? Somehow, I very much doubt that you'd want them details to be in there. But we see this in the scriptures, and this makes the internal evidence very strong to be able to trust the writers, because they talk about how they competed for places to be the most important apostle. They were known to flee when Jesus was arrested, yet claimed that they wouldn't do that. It also know that Peter denied Jesus 3 times again after saying that he would die for him and wouldn't do that. We also talk about moments of doubt in Jesus' life, whenever his own family thought that he was insane, and also when he cried out on the cross, "Why have you forsaken me, God?" So there's lots of details there which in a sense wouldn't help the apostles' story if they were in fact making this up. So it makes them as writers very credible, because they wrote while the eyewitnesses were still alive, and they also wrote many embarrassing things about themselves. So that's internal evidence. So T, time gap. I's internal evidence. M stands for manuscripts. This is the incredible bit. The Bible has an incredible number of manuscripts to back it up. Over 29,000 manuscripts of our New Testament, and also over 5,000 Greek manuscripts. Now what this is, I'm going to show you a graph there. You can see on the graph how many manuscripts all the other documents of history have. The next best to the New Testament is Homer's Iliad, which has around 640 plus manuscripts, whereas the New Testament has over 29,000. The gap of time in all the other writers is usually between 300 to 1,500 years. The gap of time of the Bible is just around 30 years between the writing and then the earliest copies that we have. This is absolutely incredible. What the experts always say, greater number of manuscripts equals a greater amount of reliability, because we can then check the manuscripts as we go along. We can check it compared to the original or the earliest ones that we have. This is incredible. The Bible passes this test easily in first place. It has more manuscript evidence than the next 10 best all combined and added together. So that's M for manuscripts. So T stands for the time gap. I stands for the internal evidence of those who wrote the information down. M stands for the manuscript evidences that we have from the Bible, which are truly astonishing. I have many more videos on that. The last one then, E, you'll know E's coming. E stands for external evidence then. So do other sources around that time confirm the information we have of the Bible that's written down that's from that same time period? So this is often the best possible evidence, because we're pulling in sources that are not out to help people become Christians. And in fact, what we're going to see now in terms of other sources around that time, the people were actual enemies of Christianity. They will seek to destroy Christianity. Many of the Roman writers are going to hear about were very much against the Christians and did not want to propagate and spread their message at all. So there's 3 main writers, but you see, hopefully I've got a graph up here. You can see there are many other works of other writers around that time that talk about Jesus and the Christians. Some of the key ones I'll pick out from them writings that we have there are Tacitus. One of the #1 Roman historians, talked about Lochs in Scotland even at one point. Very well known writer and historian, famous for his writings. He talked about the great fire in Rome that most people knew Nero caused, but that he fixed the blame of the fire on the Christians. He also talked about how Christ had undergone the death penalty around the time of Tiberius and Pontius Pilate. So he confirms the historical people who were in charge at the time, and also talks about the spread of Christianity. So that's Tacitus. He confirms the details of Jesus' death, the spread of Christianity, and also how they were abused by Nero at the time. We've also got another Roman writer who was Pliny the Younger, funny name, Pliny the Younger, and he wrote letters. He was a Roman governor of Bithynia in northwest Turkey, modern northwest Turkey, and he wrote to the Emperor Trajan about advice on how to deal with Christians. He talked about how the Christians worship Christ. He was their only God. He talked about the spread of Christianity. He talked about how they used to meet one day many days a week in their home and broke bread. So he gave a lot of specific details which are exactly the same as the book of Acts. And what these two writers confirm is where the gospel had spread to, from Jerusalem out to Rome and beyond. So they confirm the spread of Christianity and their practices. We also have Josephus, who's a Jewish historian, also confirmed Jesus' crucifixion, about John the Baptist, and also about James, the brother of Jesus. So they confirm external evidence to confirm the details of our New Testament. So what we're going to see from time, small time gap, I is internal evidence, M stands for manuscripts, E stands for external evidence, all tells us the Bible surpasses all other historical documents in terms of its trustworthiness. So if you're going to question the trustworthiness of the New Testament, you've got to question the trustworthiness of Caesar, Plato, and many other ancient writers as well. The Bible comes out in first place when these tests are applied to it. And if you remember time, you can remember some of the evidences that we have that back that up. So I just had a few questions for us to think about. Hopefully you can take some of that in. I know there's a lot of information there, but some questions to think about. Also, just before I say that, there are other videos on my site, That Bible Guy, that talk about the errors in the Bible. What are the errors, also known as variants? And also, has the Bible been changed? That's another question. So I have lots of videos. I've done a recent series on the top 10 objections to the Bible, but I've certainly looked at errors and has the Bible been changed? So I just want to give us 3 questions, just things that we can think about to help us kind of think about this information and try and make sense of some of it, because I know you are learning this at the moment. The first question is just for yourself. Think, is there a time in your life when you showed ability or reliability through a test, like I did with the football game? Successful, not the second time, not the first time. Was there a time you did a test and it showed up your ability or that you were reliable? My mum asked me to go to the shop. I knew she didn't trust me, so I went off to the shop and I demonstrated my reliability. So has there been tests in your life that have shown that, just like these tests show the reliability of Scripture? The second one, why are the special tests so important, or why are they needed? The special tests that I talked about, bibliographical, internal evidence test, and external evidence test, why are they so necessary? Why are they needed? And how do they help us be more confident in the trustworthiness of Scripture? Third thing, what is your favorite part of time? So time gap, internal evidence, manuscripts, external evidence. What's your favorite one of all them 3? What's my favorite one of these 3? Hadn't really asked myself. I'm just thinking that myself right now. I think I'd often like the manuscripts. The vast number of manuscripts is kind of incredible, really. God has helped us on earth, manuscript after manuscript. One of my favorites is John Ryland's manuscript fragment from Manchester University. It dates back to between 110 to 130 AD, and it was found in Egypt, so it's just a copy, and it's about the Gospel of John. So it helps us to show that the early dating of the Gospels. So the manuscript evidence is incredible. Again, I'll have more videos on my site about that. Do hope some of this has helped us today. We can remember time. Remember that the Bible passes the test of history in first place. I do hope we can remember some of this. If you want to ask me any questions, please feel free to do so. Christian will give you some more of the details, and you hopefully see the handout there as well. Thanks for listening today, guys. Hope this has really helped us, and I'm sure I'll speak to some of you all very soon.